About to have Playboy Stix on from the Bay Area. A historian. He is the source for me as far as the man that really puts down a lot of time and effort in documenting the history of the Bay Area, Oakland, Boogaloo, strutting. So, welcome Playboy Stix. We gonna get him on. Yo, what's good, man?
What up?
How you doing, brother?
I'm good. Just out
Yeah,
here
man.
chilling.
Good, man. It's good to see you, bro. It's been too long.
I know. It's probably, I don't even remember. Maybe when I was at a Great One Naders event.
Yeah, or maybe Oakland Boogaloo picnic, the
Yeah.
reunion. Yeah, man, that's too long, bro. But it's good to see you doing well, man. And I'm happy to have you on here, bro. Cause you're to me, you are the source of information, and like a dude. Besides the sources themselves, right? It's like someone like yourself is already. Oh, there's J5. Yeah, just constantly researching and seeking the root of it all, and the sources themselves, they lived it, but you've been able to gather a collective of perspectives to kind of cross correlate cross, analyze stories and all that.
Right. Right. It
Yeah.
takes, I feel, when I never was into history much before, but now I'm like super into it. And in any research, you always got to have these people that like kind of put things together and like put the puzzle pieces together, aside from, of course, just hearing it from the people themselves. Because
Yeah.
there's just so many stories out there, so many different
Yeah.
perspectives.
Yeah. So many stories, man. So many different areas. And so like, what is it like, bro, when you're doing this research with all these different people? What are you looking for, and like what is it that you kind of see as a commonality amongst all the stories that you hear?
Um, for me, I look for some key stuff. I mean, there's all kinds of things to look for, really, but I look from a movement perspective. That's what most people like. That's their first thing that even gets them into the history. So you got to have like some connection to what we're doing today. The movements we're doing today. So that's like kind of the one of the main things I try to do, but then also is the connection to the culture. From do these what do these movements come from? What was the feeling behind them? What was the reason for doing them? Um, and then the culture then comes all with that when you start talking to them and they start breaking down stories of things they went through, the music of the times, the fashion, all that stuff comes with it. So it brings a lot more depth to the movements themselves. So you're not just doing movements; you're representing like a whole culture, a whole yeah, everything.
Yeah, like creating a cultural context for the movement. And that's so, oh man, there's so much to that, right? Like what you were saying, the way people dress, like why they dress the way they dress, why they move the way they move. Because at the end of the day, what we're doing now, it's a different culture now. It's a different, we have different perspectives, we have different influences, and I think that's one thing that's missing a lot, when we pass down dance, is we kind of try and define it by words and like certain movements, but without the knowledge of the history, it's just gonna be like we're mimicking it instead of really speaking the language, right?
Yeah, yeah. You don't have the feeling of it really. Like you're just going through the motions, and Like you can think about that with any type of art form. It's like if you just get too technical about it and try to just break it down by the moves and what they look like and how they're executed, like that's just one aspect of it. But it's not gonna mean anything really. Like it's not gonna really connect with people, except just a visual thing. Like you can just watch it and be like, oh, that's cool. But I think what people really connect with when you see dancers more is the feeling, the
Hmm.
emotion behind it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
When you have the OGs, I mean, when you get down with them, and like when I've gotten down with them, do you see the eyes glaze over when they hear that track come on and then they just start getting down?
Yeah. Well, it's the whole shift. You see, like they just embody like a character or like a feeling. They might zone out like that, or they might get real. They look at you kind of in an aggressive way, but like uh, it's just like it takes them over, and you see them go back to that mode from that they were feeling back in the days, and that's what they connect with, and that's like the thing that I'm talking about exactly. It's like you know
Yeah.
they're not trying to show you a move really. They're like I don't know, they're showing you who they are. It's different.
Yeah. It's like to me it's like the nostalgia takes over. That it reminds me that the soul is like separate from the body. It's like uh no matter the physical limitations of age or whatever, that stuff goes out the window as soon as they hear that track. That they're 15, 16 all over again.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Yeah. So when did you feel like you really started to take interest in the history?
um I mean, there's always been like a small interest from the beginning, but the big shift was like, I mean, it had to be related to like, honestly, with this dance, like there's that whole controversy, like, and I was listening to so many stories, like, as I was learning, and it was kind of confusing too. Like, okay,
Mhm.
this story says this movement came from this and this person and this group. That doesn't make any sense and blah, blah, blah. But then I started seeing these guys come out of the Bay that I'd never even heard of. And I was like, where did they, and it's just seeing like how authentic their dance was. And just like going, where did these guys come from? Why do I not know about them? Like even being in the Bay, like I don't know about them, so like um, it made me really want to get into it. And then of course, then you have the controversy of like who created it, the style and all this stuff. And it's like, wow, this is like a big deal. Like, we haven't figured this out yet. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, so
I mean,
it's like almost like investigative reporting too, like investigative journalism. Uh, and yeah, it's crazy, man, because like it's almost realizing that we're at this really special time in the history of this movement and this culture to solidify the history because it's when I started it was the same way. You're like, well, I don't know who to listen to. I don't know what is what. Um, but I think, you started much earlier than I did. And when I started, it was kind of it was in 2009, but uh, there was already the narrative out about the Bay Area. I found out about that real early. So I didn't have so much conflict as, people that were in the early 2000s and mid 2000s, 90s, uh, there was a lot of, yeah, there was a narrative that was being really imposed on everybody that did a movement that was kind of like popping, you know. And I think a lot of people struggled with finding themselves under the kind of I don't know if this is the right word for it, but it was kind of like a dictatorship. That's kind of what I related to politically. Um, yeah, so when did you start dancing? Well, you were in the early 2000s?
2002 beginning. I went to a studio class, which wasn't even common then for popping. And I went to train with Tommy Boy. He was the teacher there,
Wow.
and I
Damn.
didn't even know. I really actually didn't even know much even what popping was. Like I was trying to b-boy before that, and then I just my girlfriend in high school at the time like was teaching at this studio and said, "Hey, this guy's he's teaching. He's supposed to be really good." And blah blah blah. So I went and I just saw what he did, and it was like magic. Like most people with this dance, it's like you see it and it's like magic, and you're just
Yeah.
like holy crap! I need to learn
What did
some of this.
Tommy Boy? So did you see popping before you went to that class with Tommy Boy?
I probably did, but I didn't really you know know how to classify it or think it was much different than like it's probably through some people like Michael Jackson and Usher. You see some moves, but you don't
Yeah.
know like that it's a separate thing. Like you just think, oh, they're just dancing, and there's these are cool moves that you do as a dancer. Um,
Yeah.
and so when he started breaking it all down, and like this is, but there was still so much he showed, like all these different things you can do in the dance, and that's what really I liked too, was that it wasn't just like a couple types of movements. Like he was tutting and roboting and waving and gliding, and it was all this stuff, and it was like amazing.
Yeah. And this was in San Jose?
Uh, yeah, the class was in San Jose. Yeah,
Yeah. And Tommy Boy's from San Jose?
he's from Santa Clara actually, which is where I'm from, which is like right next to it. Um,
Okay.
yes, city right next to it. That's where the
And
Niners play right now, their stadium.
okay, okay. And so so Tommy Boy, did he like, I mean, you first took that class and you were just, I mean, was that it? Was that the rest was history?
Pretty much.
Yeah. And then so did you just start chilling with Tommy Boy? Is that
um, a little bit. Like sometimes I would give him a ride to class, but I didn't chill with him too much outside of that. I went to like one event that he told me about, True to the Game, that was there, and that's where I first saw Money B too, and some other guys. Um, and but then I went to college right after that. 'Cause this was like my last year of high school. So then I was in Arizona for like 4.5 years, and I would learn from like watching some video stuff on the internet. YouTube wasn't out yet, so it was like whatever other sources you could find, and then there was a couple people in Arizona, and like I would come back to the Bay and see some dancers and stuff like that. Like slow progress during that time.
yeah, and then you came back to the Bay after college and then started training again.
Yeah, that's when I connected with Boogaloo Pimp because he remembered me from that same dance studio. Like Bionic would be there, and I actually took a class with Bionic before there, and I would see them actually. I would see those guys in like 2003 time. It was like Bionic, Nicodemus, Boogaloo Pimp, and Kazoo because they were like the Machine Gun Funk guys from the Bay Area, right? And I even remember when Nicodemus like brought the name idea to. I was there when he was telling them Machine Gun Funk or whatever.
Oh
Um,
wow.
so that was like their kind of beginning as a crew around that time too.
And this
But then
was
I
like
connected with Pimp when I came back in 2007.
okay, so 2003, 2002 was when you like Nicodemus and that was going down, and then you went off to college, you came back and connected with Boogaloo Pimp.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then I met Farside, some other guys like Made in China, Joe Boy Wonder, um, Frankenberry, and these kids, and then I met with Dizzy in 2008. Um, I saw him at Mighty Four, and then he saw me getting out of a 7-Eleven and started dancing in front of my car. And I was like, wait, is this that dude from like Mighty Four? Because I'd never seen him before that.
Uh,
And then he started coming to the practices, and that's how I kind of got started with the Playboys thing.
yeah, so Dizzy was already Playboys. He'd been Playboys for a little while.
Yeah, I don't know exactly when he joined, but I'd practiced with him for like almost like 2 years, I would say, and then Money B, he introduced me to Money B, and then and then that's when I joined the crew in
Uh,
2010. You know, 2010.
Dang, that's crazy, yo. So, so Tommy Boy in the initial phase was the initial inspiration. Did you ever get a chance to reconnect with him, or did was he gone at that time?
A little bit, and then he went to LA for a while, and he was trying to do big things in LA. He like toured with Black Eyed Peas at one point.
Wow.
Um, but then he kind of went off and did his own thing, and I would see him here and there, like when I came back. Um, but he was struggling with some things at that time too for a while. So then, but now he's doing a lot better. So um,
That's
yeah,
good. Yeah. And so Tommy Boy and then Bionic was around, of course, and then Boogaloo Pimp. Dang, that's a crazy lineup, bro. Like to come through that at that time, like in hindsight, did it feel like you were like in the midst of something great at the time? Or did that in hindsight you look back and you're like, dang, there was some heavy hitters at that time?
I mean, I kind of knew at that time, like because Tommy already had a name. That was like the height for him, like around that time, you know. And
Mm,
so he already had a big name, and so like it was already like I was already like amazed that I'm learning from him. And then um, the Machine Gun Funk guys had already they like really soon after they started they made a DVD of themselves, and I got a hold of that, and I was like, oh damn, these guys are really dope because I had all them in there, and then they like battled ABM. They had that one battle where it was like Machine Gun Funk versus Animated Beat Mechanics. So they were already kind of like these big crews, big names out there during that time. Um, so that was like kind of cool to be just following them and like, saying I kind of knew some of those guys.
yeah, yeah. And then like you were training with Dizzy, and is that when you felt like you first got introduced to kind of like Bay Area culture and history when you met Money B and Dizzy?
Yeah, because and, what is it called? Tommy Boy, he said here's strutting, but he only did like this one type of movement with it. It was like shuffling and pivoting and with your arms out, but like I didn't really think it was a whole thing. I didn't know what it came from and all that. So um, when I started practicing with Dizzy, because the first thing I saw, obviously, that most people see that's different about the Bay Area styles is that like Fillmore type style. And so he was really good at that because he learned from Harry Berry. Um, so like when he did that, I was like, wow, that's a dope flavor. Like I want to learn that. And
Mm,
so I started, and then he would break down what he learned and talking about all the history. And then I was just like, that's I guess when I probably first started getting into it because I think at that time too, I would see like Pop Tart and Harry Berry a little bit here and there, um, and just kind of be like who are these guys and what are they doing? Um,
yeah.
yeah.
Dang, man. So at that time, it's late 2000s. And then I think I met you probably 2000, either 2000, I think it was probably 2010, when Playboys battled Funny Bones
Oh,
at
yeah,
that battle.
2011 maybe. Yeah.
Was that, I
Yeah.
might have, I mean, if J5 is listening, he'll let us know, but it might have been King's War.
Yeah. King's War.
Uh, yeah, King's War, that's right. Man, oh shit, that was at Chuco's Justice Center in Inglewood. And
Yeah.
yeah, I remember that, bro. I remember you guys all pulling up. And see, like that was 1 year after I had started, and yeah, like because then I was already attuned to kind of like, oh shit, Bay Area is on some yeah, Kings War, yeah. So it was like, oh, Bay Area is on some other stuff, and then even in 2009, I think it might have been another one of J5's battles where he threw it in an art like an art gallery, and
Hmm.
Dizzy battled. I think he battled Slim Boogie at the time.
Yeah,
And or no, he battled Wizard too. I think from Funny
yeah.
Bones. So that was crazy to see, you know. And I saw the waves and the tuts and the glides, and I was like, yo, that's like the because at the time I was only roboting really and waving.
Hmm.
And tutting just seemed out of this world to me. So when I saw someone do it all, I was like, dang, that's kind of the format, you know. That's what I want to do, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
um, so yeah, and Dizzy had all these crazy combos and hat tricks and stuff too. It was wild.
Mhm.
And to see a big dude that was moving smooth like that too was crazy. But then I saw you guys come down and you guys repping like you guys had all the San Jose Shark shit where you had on, and you guys were battling Funny Bones, and that was wild, man. Uh, those battles were really hype. I haven't seen like there's just not that atmosphere anymore. It seems like where there's like crew on crew and there's a little bit of drama and a little bit of fire. You know, I haven't
Yeah.
seen that in a while.
Yeah, it's a rare thing nowadays. I mean, it still happens, but like, um, yeah, that was like, I mean, we came prepared. We wanted to like, rep our stuff. We had our routines. We had to, the dressing alike with the colors and all that. So we had to, it really like, that kind of event and the crew stuff, I feel like really like makes you take it to the next level, like because you have to coordinate with people. It's like more involved, and you have your crew behind you. There's just like more energy. Um, there's just more to it to me than like just doing the one-on-one stuff, which is
Yeah,
cool too.
yeah, it kind of pushes you, right? Like you see your crew leveling up, you gotta level up. Like you don't want to be the weak link, and you
Yep.
also want to like rep where you're from and kind of like put your whole team on the map.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and do you
and
feel like that was like what they had back in the day as well?
yeah, you would see that a lot. I mean, you see it in b-boy battles still a lot. But like any group stuff, you see it. But yeah, I feel like back in the days, that was like a huge thing, especially in like the '90s and early 2000s. I feel like you had your whole like, and it was a lot of the b-boy stuff. I feel like too. It was like they maybe had a popper in their crew because I think the '90s, that's what happened. Is like there wasn't as much like popping specific stuff, and it was like the poppers were joining these b-boy crews and like repping in those battles. So it totally changed like that dynamic. And then that's like I feel like that's Tommy's like flavor because when he comes out in battles, he kind of like has that b-boy mentality too.
Yep,
Um,
yep. That's interesting because like people like Frantic and Devious and like all the guys that were like J5, all those guys kind of had that b-boy mentality as well, where it was like this little bit of aggression, but somewhere along the line the culture started to shift where it was incorporating, and I'm not saying it in a bad way, I'm just saying that this shift kind of started to integrate more introverted people. Would you say like you have like more introverted people that were coming into the game, and um, some little bit of the aggression just got taken out? Do you, why do you think that is?
um, it's a good, observation. Like I think it's probably the fact that it's just like more people got involved, and you're gonna have a lot of people that are just like not in the culture like that, like not, not from the streets, not, and there's these people that don't really have this like reason to be like aggressive. And, and I say this too, coming from that, because I'm not an aggressive person either, um, but at the same time, when I went into it, that was like a big thing in the dance. Like
Yeah.
it was just part of it. You come in and you battle and you take a battle seriously, even if you don't really feel it like that. it's a challenge still, and it's something to get hyped up about. But now I think because we have so many people and so many events and so much ways to like express ourselves like online and get seen all the time, like
Mm,
it's not as in I don't know. I feel like there was more to it. When you go to a battle back then, it was like it didn't happen as often, and you really wanted to like show out there, or you really wanted to, or it was like really hyped because it was like this big build up, like for the
yeah,
whole year you waited for this thing, and
yeah,
I just feel like there was a lot more to it then, and you didn't even see like videos of people. You don't even know what they're doing, what they've like learned in the past year. Like I don't know,
mm.
it was just there was a lot more to each event back then. I feel like.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like the role that like the internet played on that too. It seems like more of the aggression shifted to to Facebook, you know? And then
Yeah.
like when it comes down to real life stuff, it was like what happened to that aggression on on Facebook? Like but that makes a really good point. Like there was way more. This was like your chance to be seen, like this was the chance to show out and like show what you've been working on and put your name out there. Now it's like, yeah, follow me on Instagram or yeah, you can post a clip every day if you want. Um, and yeah, I even feel that pull now. This year was like really the first year I really started to post my dance a lot. Before that, I was kind of part of that generation that was told, don't show your shit because people are gonna bite it. Save it for the battles, and that stuck with me a lot. But it was really like this insecurity of like posting, like maybe I think part of it is the realization that I don't own any of this, right? And a lot of the ideas that we create, they're not truly like original. They're more like co-created with everybody. And so we can't really claim ownership. So part of me like releasing a bunch of footage this year was to actively kind of get rid of the ego by just posting it because somebody could just mimic it and do it. It's not like it's impossible to do, but the belief in my creativity to keep going, it actually pushes me to keep going by releasing like good footage of myself.
Hmm.
And
Yeah. Kind of along those lines, but I would say like between that philosophy and also the battle mentality is something like I hear from Money B a lot, where because we'll say stuff like that, like, "Oh, B, you're showing too much," like blah blah blah. But he'll always come back like, "Whatever, like I could make a new one right now, like it's all good." Like like to
yeah,
know that you have that in you to keep creating, and it kind of pushes you, like you said, to create more and be like, all right, fine, take it. Like, I'll just come up with something better tomorrow and smash you with it or whatever. You could still have that kind of battle mentality, um, but that mentality, like what you're saying too. Um,
it's hard to do, man. It's like you confront your insecurities when you're releasing this stuff. And I think this idea though, yeah, when you start to realize like, okay, I'm actually a machine that's continuing to work, um, and you believe in the process and you believe in your ability to always be evolving, that if somebody's always copying you, they're a day behind.
yeah, 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 for sure.
Yeah. So it keeps you on your toes, man. It does for sure. But yeah, man, I think this brings me to this point, like when we're talking about the kind of aggression that kind of left the game and the battle mentality. It's more like the competitions are more like showcases now. Um, the culture evolves. So from day one, from way back to now, it's evolved a lot. But we still call it like the culture. Um, but my question is like, what is your philosophy on like a culture that is evolving from the traditions? When does it still, when is it still part of the culture, and when is it something else?
Mm. Yeah, it's a tough question. You have to really, and I think something I think I kind of addressed this in a Digs Deeper session when it was like, um, it's really up to the community as a whole to kind of decide that, because it's their collective culture, you know. And the problem now, you know, nowadays we have so many people in the community that like it's really tough to do that, like to come to a consensus. And you never really, you kind of do as a community, but then you're gonna have always gonna have like smaller groups that want to branch off, and that's fine. Like I welcome it all because I think that's how a lot of these new things get started anyway. And there's a lot of these kids that started these dances we do that wanted to do something different and create their own thing. And that's kind of how these dances got created to begin with. But there's also, um, you know, value in maintaining the traditions. And it's this really tough balance of like, you know, welcoming the innovation and the changes, but maintaining the traditions. And then, you know, still calling it something. But if the thing is, if you're going to keep the name and you're going to keep a lot of the elements of it that make it what it is, that's when you really have to think about it like seriously if you're going to try to like call it something different or like say it's something different deep down. You know, if you're going to keep the name popping and boogaloo or whatever, you have to know what comes with that, you know.
Mhm.
And then if you're going to change the name but you're kind of keeping all the elements and so it's not really that different, you got to kind of know that too, you know, like.
Mm.
And I don't know. I think it's a tough one. But a lot of people try to take all those paths. I see it all the time with any dance style.
Yeah. Yeah, with any dance style, it's like that. With any dance style, there's always a discrepancy between what is what, you know, where something came from, and you know, like for example, like one that's come up a couple times recently in these interviews is like, well, you have tutting and then you have connecting and the flexing, you know, and okay, you know, what is what, and you know, is it something different? Is connecting something different? Because to us, it looks a lot like tutting. But then when we tut, it looks like a lot like connecting to them, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
when you have these cultures that are like, I'll talk to people of new generations of like flexing, the flexing or like turfing, and they had no knowledge of what came before them. You know, they were just growing up in the neighborhood, and the first people they saw connect, you know, was like that's what they called it, and that's you know, and the people before them, that's what they called that, you know, and it had its own lineage. Um, but it's so far from the origin because maybe the origin was inspired by popping, but it's so many generations removed already that there's no connection anymore.
Yeah, and that's what'll happen. And but the thing people, I think, as a if you care about the culture um, of things, then it's kind of just something where you got to like do the research yourself, like because that's like in this situation you're describing. I would go back to the begin, you know, the origins of it, and talk to those first guys that they say were the first connectors, and say, well, where did you get your influence from? You know, they
Hmm.
might say that they got it from a lot of stuff from popping or something else or whatever. Um, and then you kind of have your answer, like you kind of, but you can still say that what they do is different because each generation, you know, what makes it different is like the music, you know, because they dance to different music than we do, right?
Yeah.
So the feeling, the whole feeling and the way they execute the moves can be a lot different because of that. Um, and just whatever else is going on in their community and their culture, right? So
Mm.
same thing with like waivers and liquid and all this, you know, there's that stuff too. And it's like, well, they have a different music and they have a different feeling when they wave and some different ideas and different ways of doing it. But they still might have this like link to popping because that's who they first saw like doing whatever waves, right?
Yeah.
But
Well,
that's
like,
where the history is important because you find all that stuff out.
yeah, because like for example, we can bring it a little closer to home, right? So we have Boogaloo, we have Poppin', we have Smurfin' in Europe, we have like these things that like even within the Bay, you had people calling it hitting or diamond or um
Banging.
yeah, just different like words to describe what people were seeing. And then you have pop locking, you have all this stuff. And it's hard to like now there's the debate of like popping being an umbrella term. Um, and that was I think that brings into our point like it is a kind of collective decision, even though that word in the beginning might have meant something very specific. But the way it's been used for the past, I think, what, 20 years probably, it's been an umbrella term. So it's kind of hard to turn back on that now.
Yeah, there's that. But also with this dance, I mean, to speak on that specifically, what's interesting is that in my mind, from everything I hear and see, I would say that popping has been more of an umbrella term in general than it has been a specific, thing. It's its own dance style. Like that's all you do. Because like even back then when they were doing it, when they say they created popping and stuff, these guys were not just sitting there hitting a couple of times. Like
Yeah.
they were backslide. They would throw in their moves. Every early clip you see, they're gonna do some other stuff in there. And if they didn't do it, the other guy in their crew did it, or someone they were battling, or whatever. And this dance from the beginning has always welcomed like all that stuff. It's basically like illusional movements and funk feeling. Like that's it. That's the essence of this specific dance. And so like from the beginnings of Boogaloo, and that's why I liked going back to the history of this dance because the early Boogaloos would say that it was like multiple things. They weren't just you could be just a robot or someone that specialized in something, right? But the dance as a whole, it wasn't defined by that like specialty or like
Mm,
that one person or that one group. It was like, you know, they combined all this stuff from the beginning, and that's why it kept going through popping. That's why popping, those people that try to say it's a specific thing, that's why they can't shake it.
uh,
They can't shake all that stuff off because it's always been there. It's always gonna be there.
yeah. Well, it's also I think yeah, it's because it's in the music. All that stuff's in the music. Like that movement, that sound that inspires that is also in the music. So you could straight pop, yeah. Uh, but yeah, when it comes to boogalooing, like boogalooing,
How many people do that?
like a couple, a couple. So it's
I'm
not a
not saying people don't, but like, it's
yeah,
like, come on.
yeah. But I mean, it's also like it's not a it when it comes down to what we consider the culture and definitions. It's like when I say a word, like if I say butter, right? I'm
Mhm.
like, well, actually, butter means fish. And well, everybody else when I say butter, they don't think of fish, right? So
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying is like we have to like our culture is defining words collectively and not by one person. Um, but would you say boogaloo is actually more of a umbrella term than poppin'?
I mean, in the word, it's like looking at the word itself, it fits that better,
Mhm.
right? And that's why I think it was the original umbrella term because
Yeah.
it didn't have, that history of that word has a lot of just association with like a free spirited kind of just boogieing, even like getting down.
Mm.
Um, so it makes kind of sense that it didn't have a specific, there was a specific boogaloo trendy dance in the 60s, but that wasn't the only thing boogaloo was attached to, so it always also meant this like kind of just getting down, this free spirited thing. So the problem when popping became the popular word, for whatever reason, that one took off. It created this problem because it was also a word to describe like a specific thing in the dance, specific technique.
Yeah.
And so that just choosing that word, why was a problem, from the get-go. Boogaloo would have been a better, because then you wouldn't say like, then you wouldn't have that same problem you just mentioned. Like, it's called boogaloo, so you should just be boogieing or like, what is that? Like it's pop is a specific thing. Right?
Yeah. And also it can become like, well, you said another word earlier was like, banging, right? Oh, he's banging, she's banging, and like you have this banging, so it's also articulating what somebody's seeing, but now you have banging, which I associate like with like a really hard pop, right? So you're like, oh, that's a bang right there. Even Crump uses the word bang, right? And it has a like almost like a harder uh aesthetic to it. And so he's just popping, but he's banging, like uh and so it gets weird with words, and other cultures even adopt them when you call them like a bang with crump means something different. And when we talk about boogaloo, I know shout out to Otis on this one. If you guys haven't checked out the podcast Playboy Stix did with Otis, that's a good one to check out because you have like videos that coincide with what you're explaining as well. So that's a really good informational one. Go to Otis Funkmeyer on YouTube. But yeah, this like when you trace back, I remember we did an interview like way back, like I mean it's probably like 4 or 5 years ago, right? And you were talking about the origin of the word boogaloo getting traced back to New Orleans. And you were talking about the first uses of the word boogaloo.
Mm-hmm.
And you said it was from there was a square in New Orleans that that a lot of like culture got passed through the Caribbean and through the slave trade, right? That there was a lot of African Americans that were going through New Orleans, and there was a lot of like dance culture and rhythm and music that was passing through that same area, right?
Yeah, Congo Square. And I don't know if Boogaloo was actually there specifically, but it was in the South. But the earliest documentation of the word is in Time magazine from a woman from Georgia. Says there was a happy-go-lucky Negro man named Boogaloo. So it was in the South to describe an African American man that was happy-go-lucky, right? So like kind of like that same free-spirited idea, right? So it kind of like fits that. But the Congo Square was even before that. There was it was basically this area in New Orleans where the enslaved Africans were allowed to once a week on Sunday to dance and to come together and play music. They would sell goods. It would be like a cultural kind of exchange there. And this was very rare, especially in the United States, where it was so strict. They were super strict with how they enslaved Africans here. They would, not allow them to play music or anything that was related to their past, but for certain reasons, this place in Louisiana for a certain period of time, they were allowed to do that. And this is where they say like a lot of African-American art forms kind of came from, which would be like jazz being kind of the earliest, and other things like that. So it was a crucial area because it was one of the only places where they can do that. So for U.S. history, African-American history, it was a crucial part of it.
Yeah. And so what era was this? What time period was this Congo Square?
Ooh, I'm gonna mess this up. Um, I want to say it's definitely during the 1800s, and I have to look it up again. But you can actually there's a Congo Square Preservation Society that still is keeping the history going and everything. So I would
Okay.
definitely say look at that because I'm gonna forget the exact date right now.
Yeah, no worries on that, man. It's like there's too much to remember, bro. I'm telling you,
Yeah.
there's too much. But yeah, that's super important to check out. Congo Square preservation. Um, yeah, I think, the one thing I was really curious about too, when it comes to when things, cultures adopt something, and this is a really sticky topic and a really, you know, tough topic to talk about as well. But the kind of idea that this dance is associated with a certain race or ethnicity, and it's something I think that needs to be talked about and discussed. And even though it breaks my heart in some ways, I I feel like it's something we really need to dive into. But when it comes to the origins of this culture, we talk about um, Black, African American, brown music that was really influencing the movement to begin with, right? So um, then it becomes a dance, right? And usually, I can probably say this with the most confidence, is it there's this realm of ideas that like things can come down to, and music is one of those bridges from this other dimension of ideas and movement and sound, and it comes down to people. And normally what happens is it comes down to people that are less inhibited in that realm, especially, right? So people of that descent are more attuned to rhythm, more attuned to music, is part of their culture and upbringing. So then the dance comes to them first, correct?
Yeah, I think I kind of find like I mean there is a African American communities have like a specific connection with rhythm that's very strong because of their African descent. They're that's you can draw that link very clearly. But also what you're saying is that this as the music's changing or whatever's going on with the music, the dance reflects it, and that's like totally true with this dance as well. And the thing that spawned this dance was the whole funk movement. Um, and so if you think about the change in music at that time from more soulful music, Motown type style of sounds, you have kind of a swingy feeling to it. But then you go into funk, which James Brown was helping pioneer, um, bringing in what Ricky Vincent, who's, if you want to learn about the music, that's the guy, and Otis did a interview with him. Um, but he describes it as the funk movement as re-Africanizing the music of the time. And so bringing in this more like rhythmic, harder feeling to the music. And that's exactly what funk was doing. And so the dance went with that. So you get a dance that's like harder, and that's where all the stops, there's a lot more stops. And that's one of the big elements of Boogaloo that started it was all that posing and that stopping, right? And that
Mm-hmm.
went right with the music, right? When that drummer hits that one or whatever, boom.
Yeah, so when it comes to that, what is your thoughts on like there's people like of different descents now that are a part of the culture. And would you consider them guests in the culture? Would you consider them, are they, do they, I don't know exactly the way to word this, but do you feel like other cultures now, you know, initially the origins are certain, but culture is also evolving. So do like white, Asian, are they forever guests in a culture that was originally you know, African American or Latino?
I mean, I kind of think yes, like, and it's not bad to be a guest, right?
Mhm.
It's like that doesn't mean, I mean, you welcome your guests into your home and like they're treated like your family, you know, like so it's not a bad thing. And they can also what's happened over the years, right? Those certain communities have brought in their own flavor and their own movements to change, you know, what's going on, but you can't forget the roots and you can't like just you know, now we're gonna call it this like universal thing because like you got to think about too what we do with other um, art forms and other things like let's say martial arts, right, is a good example of this, where everybody knows like kung fu is a Chinese martial arts form, right?
Yeah.
And nobody really like argues that. When you go into it, you respect it, you learn about the culture, you might even learn the language and how what they call the movements, where they come from. If you represent like a tiger style or a, you know, whatever goes into that, right? And so we have no problem like keeping that going and calling it that. And even like with people bring up this one a lot, like food, right? Like you have Italian food, like pasta or something. You might make a Mexican style pasta or whatever, but you're not gonna like, you know, ignore its Italian roots. Or
Hmm.
you're gonna say it's a Mexican style pasta or
Yeah.
whatever. You know what I mean? So like we gotta kind of apply that to these art forms. And especially when we're talking about African American art forms, because they are shitted on the most out of
Mhm.
all, you know, our American art forms. And there's reasons for that with all the amount of systemic racism and institutional racism. So you got to kind of like really think about that when we're talking about these things, and keep that in mind. Like, because for me, that's a huge part of it is like we need to really give extra attention to these art forms that come from the African American community and like help preserve them in our circles and make sure people aren't forgetting where they come from, you know, because
Yeah.
it's really easy to forget them because there's this whole system fighting against them like that, you
Yeah.
know.
No, 100%, man. I agree. Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I think I completely agree with that in the sense there are also issues, and I think it comes with more personal things, but where there is oh, man, it's hard to say like when there's I don't really even know how to word it, man. It's like, you know, it's such a kind of politically correct thing to talk about, and I feel like it's not even in my place to talk about these things sometimes. And but when you talk about the idea of, uh, for example, let's talk about Robert Shields, right? So Robert Shields, this is a good kind of integration of two different cultures, but you have Robert Shields who was doing mime and robot, and then it gets integrated into the funk culture.
Mm-hmm.
So you have Robert Shields, who is I don't know his background, but his appearance is white, uh, and
I'm
uh,
pretty sure he fits that. Yes.
yeah, I got that. But as far as you know, when did the robot get funkified? You know, and also do you know you see the black culture give credit to Robert Shields a lot, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's super important. I love the way you put it. You know, when you go to somebody's house, like I always think, okay, we are in like the idea of being a guest is not always a bad thing. And what I thought about is like this is a African American house that we're all in, and we can all bring our dish to the dinner, But at the end of the day, you just got to recognize whose house it is. And you can
Right.
all be family and you can all have talks and you can all dance and celebrate and live life to the fullest and enjoy the beauty of this existence. But at the end of the day, just understand like, yo, bring your dish to the table and let's all eat together. But we
Yeah.
all we have to realize the houses we're in.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know,
Yeah.
and you gotta put yourself in. You gotta find something that makes sense to you too. And I like to use those other examples. Like, and if you're going to a Mexican household, it's the same, kind of respect that you have to pay. And if you start going in there and like, maybe they're playing mariachi music and you're trying to change, add your flavor, and then all of a sudden you're trying to say like, oh, now this is like everyone's music, and it kind of like takes away from the fact that it was like a Mexican American art form or whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm kind of making this up right now as I go, but like,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to say that there's a lot of other examples, and you got to think about in a way that makes sense to you and that you can relate with, and think about even things that are your culture, and if they got changed in some way, how would you feel? You know?
Yeah. And Surf just I'm watching these comments, guys, by the way. They're hella funny, but Surf just said that like half the people give Robert Shields credit and half the people hate on it.
Oh yeah. Well, he can't. I think one thing to say about him is there's definitely a lot of people in this dance that give him credit, but there's other people too that didn't really look to him as a robot influence. Also,
Mm,
so we can't just say he's like the robot influence for popping or boogaloo, right?
okay.
Um, you can say he was a big influence to a lot of people in the dance. That's for sure. I mean, you have people that in Richmond they have a whole, they call it shields, and there's like a whole style revolved around him. And but people like John Murphy were doing the robot really early in the dance, and they didn't look to Shield specifically. I don't know if he looked to like some sci-fi movies and stuff,
Mm,
um, and possibly maybe saw mimes. I don't know, but and Shields wasn't the only mime either, right?
yeah.
So you know, but mimes are a big influence too. You gotta, But again, you said the point is they all got funkified, right? That's the
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They got funkified, man.
yeah.
That's for sure. The shield, the robot that was in that got integrated into dance was not these Shields and Yarnell shows.
hmm Yeah, it's
Yeah.
different, and that's the point. That's why it's all these art forms take influences from everywhere, and no moves never been done ever before on this earth, right? But we still have to give credit to who created a style, who combined all these moves together, and who put this specific feeling to this specific music, right? That's what really makes a style.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, the funkification, man, funkification of different things. See, I think that's one thing that I think personally why I'm so attracted to, Black culture, Latino culture is one, just the love, like the personalities you meet, the personability, like the relationship, like the relational aspect and the freedom of dance and music. Like that's not what I was brought up in at all. So you know, you kind of wonder like, dang, was I just born in the wrong place? Like, I wonder like, dang, my culture is not that. And some people will say like, what is white culture? And despite what you might think as far as the lack of culture, but that lack of culture is also a culture. It's just kind of the way. This is about to end right now. I'm gonna open up a new one real quick. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.